Hi, thank you everyone for joining our webinar on tokenization strategy. We just opened up the line, but we're going to give it a few minutes for people to join, so just hang tight. But you're in the right spot, so looking forward to diving in. If you just joined us, welcome to our conversation on tokenization strategy. I'm just going to give it 1 or 2 minutes if people are jumping from their previous meeting to join us, and then we will dive in. We have 30 minutes of great pieces to cover with you all today. All right, I am going to kick things off. Thank you everyone for joining. Today, we're super excited to have a discussion with you all on tokenization strategy and how to get more from your card vault. Kick things off, just a quick overview of what we'll be discussing today. For the agenda, we'll be talking through the advantages of vault consolidation. We'll talk about benefits and considerations for using network tokens. And then finally, we'll talk about how AI can be leveraged to improve outcomes. And I'm joined here today with Yossi. Yossi, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yes, nice to meet you all. I'm Yossi. I'm from the payment product team, leading our 3DS and tokenization products.
Awesome. And my name is Rebecca Stone. I'm on the product marketing team here at Forder, working closely with Yossi and merchants to help ensure that our products are meeting their needs. So without further ado, we want to actually kick things off with a question. So I'm going to launch a poll that you should see pop up on your screen right now. And the first question we want to understand is just how are you vaulting your cards today? So are you leveraging, did you build something in-house? Are you working with your processor or a third-party independent vendor, or maybe you're not sure? So I'm just going to give 10 more seconds. So if you haven't answered the question yet, feel free to do so. All right, thank you for those who took that. It looks like we have a really great actual split. So some of you are working with your processor, others are using a third-party independent vendor, and some in-house are unsure. So it's great background as we progress through the webinar today for us to know. All right, so let's dive into the advantages of vault consolidation. Yossi, can you walk us through why you are seeing merchants looking to consolidate their vault?
Sure. So, as you all may know, some merchants get their tokenization solutions directly from the PSP, which means that the PSP manages their card vault, keeping it updated with account updater and provision their network tokens. Now, if a merchant is only using one PSP, this setup works just fine. However, if a merchant is using or considering using multiple PSPs, then this kind of setup can be very expensive and complicated because most PSPs, they don't allow merchants to use their tokens with other PSPs. So the merchants must choose. Either they stick with one PSP for certain cards, giving up the option to apply intelligent PSP routing, or they store each card with each one of their PSPs, which means they have to pay duplicative costs for different network tokens and account updater services, and of course, orchestrate the card maintenance over multiple vaults. And that's the main reason I see more merchants looking into consolidate their card vaults.
So for merchants who are employing or looking to invest in a multi-processor strategy, in those circumstances, vault management becomes more important due to some of those factors you mentioned with the duplicative costs and the maintenance. So for those on the call with a multi-processor strategy, how would you recommend they attack vaulting?
Yes, so for such merchants, I recommend considering an agnostic token vault, which means that the vault is centralized outside of the PSP by an independent vendor. An agnostic vault allows you to get all the classic benefits of vaulting, like minimizing the PCI scope and reducing the risk of security breaches, but it also provides you full control over your cards.
Can you speak a little bit more to, you mentioned how agnostic token vaults can maximize authorizations and keep costs low. Why would these factors be influenced necessarily by where tokenization sits?
So first, this approach minimizes the maintenance costs, and obviously you only need to maintain a single vault instead of multiple PSP vaults. It also enables you the flexibility to dynamically route payments between processors for balancing the conversion and cost. And of course, it creates some business leverage with your existing processors because your cards are not locked with any of them.
Awesome. And I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but for those joining us, there is a Q&A panel. So if you have any questions for Yossi or me throughout the webinar, please feel free to leverage that and ask questions. We'll save time at the end for questions. But we also want to encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar too, as we're kind of going through these different discussion points. And we actually just got one that came in. It's wondering if I'm currently using one processor for tokenization, but looking to move to a multi-processor strategy. Like, how does the migration of tokens work?
So basically, any gateway that you are using to store your cards will allow you to export your vaults, but it has to be a secure destination, which is PCI compliant with level 1. So if you are considering to move into independent tokenization vendor, they are most likely will provide you some secure destination, which your current gateway will push and move the files of your exported vaults. And it's important in such case to validate with your future tokenization vendor that they are supporting the needed format that the gateway is providing.
Okay, great. Thank you. I hope that answered your question. If not, let us know. Moving on to our next section, which is the benefits and considerations of using network tokens. We're going to ask for a little bit more audience participation here. So you should see another poll pop up on your screen. And we're just wondering if you're using network tokens today. Yes, currently using, no, not using or considering, no, but it's on our roadmap, or I don't know. And give another 10 seconds. So if you haven't yet voted, feel free to vote. All right. It looks like everyone is currently using network tokens who responded to the poll. So this next section I think should be super interesting then as we dive into a little bit more about how you guys are leveraging them. So I think first of all, Yossi, we've heard a lot of merchants discuss the differences between PCI tokens and network tokens. Can you talk through how you differentiate between the two of them?
Sure. So network tokens were introduced about 8 years ago by Visa and MasterCard. And unlike PCI tokens, which are not based on any industry standard and are generated by a gateway or independent token vendor, the network tokens are provisioned by the card networks themselves. And they are also doing it according to the in vivo tokenization standard. So this is one thing. This also means that unlike PCI tokens, network tokens can be used for payment without requiring to detokenize them first. Instead, the merchants can simply pass them along the payment flow as if they were PANs.
Got it. So network tokens, PCI, different. And how do network tokens interact with the payment processing flow and landscape?
So the way it works is that the merchant sends the authorization request with the PCI token to the token provider, which is in this example, an independent tokenization vendor. The token provider then converts the PCI token into a network token and a one-time cryptogram, and then forwards the adjusted authorization payload to the PSP. The PSP sends the authorization request still with the network token and cryptogram to the card network, which then converts the network token to the PAN and finalizes the payment flow with the issuer.
Okay, and so it kind of passes throughout the whole entire flow to a certain extent, at least until you get to the card network. And that's when the change occurs to actual account number. And why are you starting to see more and more merchants leverage network tokens? I'm sure a lot of people in this call who are using them, or have seen some benefits as well.
I think it's simply because network tokens, they come with some great benefits. First off, they have a built-in lifecycle management feature run by the card network, which means they are always up to date, even if the original underlying PAN is expired or reissued. And in addition, network tokens are considered more secure because the PAN stays tokenized throughout the entire payment process, all the way to the card network. They are only valid within a specific enterprise domain, and they should be authenticated before each payment with a one-time cryptogram. And another cool feature of network tokens is card art. It lets you personalize the payment page with the original card graphic associated with the token, so the buyer feels more comfortable when they see something familiar. Now, considering all these benefits, using network tokens can actually boost your authorization rate by a whole percentage points. And if that's not enough, we should also mention that Visa really encourage merchants to utilize network tokens. So they offer lower interchange fee for transactions processed with network tokens rather than with PAN. And it can reach even sometimes to 10 bips.
That's awesome. I'm curious, since so many merchants on the call or those joining us are leveraging network tokens, if any of you guys out there want to write in the chat of any additional benefits that you've seen so far with your implementation of network tokens, I think that would be super interesting. So you should see a webinar chat feature too. So feel free if you're comfortable sharing sharing any experience you've had in terms of the benefits with network tokens so far. So we know they can have a big impact on the bottom line, but I know there's also considerations that a lot of merchants are thinking through in terms of whether or not to roll out network tokens. So can you walk us through what some of those key considerations are as well?
Yes, sure. So as we said, network token can come with great benefits. They can optimize your payment performance, but there are a few things to keep in mind when considering them. First is the expected authorization uplift. It's important to note that network tokens, they are not universally supported by all issuers yet. So some issuers may not fully participate in the program or may only support it partially, especially in terms of the lifecycle management feature or across different regions. This also applies to alternative card networks like Card Bancaire, EFTPOS. For example, if you provision a network token based on a pure Card Bancaire card, which is not co-branded with Visa and MasterCard, then the performance of this network token with international transactions will be lower than with domestic ones. So in order to optimize your authorization rate with network tokens, you should have some decision-making logic, which will take into account the issuer support, the network capabilities, and regional coverage. Next, there is also the cost factor. So while restricting tokens to specific domain can be a great security feature of network tokens, it practically enforces global enterprises to provision multiple network tokens for the same card, since they have multiple domains. Additionally, the interchange fees discounts, they can be different per region, per network, and sometimes even per acquirer, depending on your pricing model. So merchants should really verify these details in advance with their PSP and also with their tokenization provider, and take them into account when deciding in real time whether to process with network token or PAN. User experience, it also plays a role and is also affected by network tokens, because while network tokens can improve the user experience with features like lifecycle management and card art, it's important to note that provisioning a network token can take a few seconds. So if you want to minimize this latency, you might consider to provision a network token only after the first transaction from the card, meaning mainly for returning buyers rather than for guest traffic.
Awesome. We had a few questions come into the chat. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A piece. So one question is around Apple Pay and Google Pay, and just how mobile wallets work. Are they considered tokens, and how we should think about them?
Yes, so the way Apple Pay and Google Pay work is that they use something which is called the device-bound network token, which is a network token which is provisioned while making a strong customer authentication with the device, meaning the cryptogram which is used is associated with device data, and there is also a friction in the first transaction when the token is provisioned. It comes with the benefit of providing you liability shift for any transaction. But as we said, there is the friction when creating the network token. So on the one hand, you get a higher authorization rate, but it comes with a bit more complicated setup. If you want to use directly with the Passport network token, I mean, and of course the friction.
Okay, awesome. Another question we came in is, our processor tokenizes as a one-to-one relation regardless of selling channel. How is Forder looking to bridge the gap? And then for additional context, this is a multi-brand retailer where their token is unique across all selling channels and brands.
So this is one of the reasons why it's so important to consolidate the vault on the one hand, so we'll be able to support that across multiple brands. If you are a multiple entities business and you have different VAT, different legal addresses, different domains, then it is very difficult to reach to a situation when you are not provisioning multiple network token per card. So that this is one of the challenges. Yeah.
Awesome. Another question came in terms of with regards to the considerations you just walked through. Can you provide examples to areas where you see or Forder has seen network tokens performing well so far?
Yes. So first of all, it's important to emphasize, as we said, that the performance is very dependent on the identity of the issuer. But roughly, if you want to take a look on a level of a region, then we can say that It's performing very well in North America, also around 80% there, and 70% adoption in Europe. To give more accurate example, than Scandinavian countries, for example, they perform very well with network token. Australia performs, we see indication that Australia performing well with network tokens. And there are some countries that if you use network tokens without any optimization of deciding smartly when to utilize it, then you get a negative performance. But if you use it wisely, then for some issuers, you can see an uplift of even 6 or 7 percentage points. For example, Brazil or Singapore. So those are just a few examples.
That's super interesting a little bit in terms of how different regions and issuers react differently to network tokens. We had another question come in, which is, what is the difference between network tokens and account updater for lifecycle management?
Yes, so actually those capabilities are completing each other, creating synergy to make the lifecycle management better performing. Because as we said, network token is not always supported. So there are cases where you need to authorize with the PAN. And it means that you need to keep your PAN always up to date. And the way to do that is with network tokens. So while network tokens are getting updated automatically by the car network, you should use account updater to update the underlying PAN by yourself.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's proceed to our last discussion topic, which is around leveraging AI to improve outcomes. We have one more poll question for you all on the call, just asking how you decide when to use network tokens today. It sounds like most of you are using it, so we're curious, are you using rule set, processor recommendations, AI, or not sure, or not using network tokens? So I'm just going to leave this up for a minute to give some time for a response. All right, I'm going to give just 10 more seconds. I'm still seeing some responses come in. All right, end poll. Super interesting. It sounds like similar, it's a little bit across the board. So we have some people who are managing rule sets or leveraging process recommendation, others who are using AI and machine learning. So that's great to see. All right, with that, Yossi, can you kind of talk through the role of AI and how you see it impacting card vaulting strategy?
Well, in my opinion, AI plays a crucial role when designing a tokenization strategy. We mentioned earlier, it's essential to have some decision-making logic to determine before each payment, which payment credential would be the most beneficial to process with network token or PAN. So considering the numerous factors involved in such a decision, like the issuer preference, the network capabilities, the processing fees, which all of them can change instantly based on dynamic policies, by the way, I think it's highly preferable to leverage machine learning capabilities and learn deeply from all those data points instead of relying on a rule-based logic. It won't work well in such case.
If I want to apply a model to my tokenization decisioning today, I know we had some merchants who are using rules-based or leveraging processor recommendations. Where would you recommend merchants starting?
Well, the quickest thing to do is to check with your tokenization provider if they offer some analytical capabilities which will allow you to get those decisions. And if not, there are some vendors who provide such capabilities based on the AI.
Awesome.
Of course, you can always develop it in-house, but it will require additional effort. But again, very dependent on the needs of the merchant.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting to see how AI has evolved and it's becoming increasingly critical when it comes to payment optimization, and tokenization definitely does not seem like an exception to that rule.
No. Yeah.
Great. Well, to kind of wrap things up, we're going to leave a few minutes for questions, but just to give everyone some key takeaways from this discussion, things to consider. One is around, look into consolidation, centralizing your payment card vault, especially if you're using or looking to use a multi-processor strategy. If you aren't yet using network tokens, although it seems like most of you guys on the call are ahead of the pack here, it's important to kind of quantify the impact they can have your business, especially in terms of authorization rates and those lower fees. And then finally, with the broad improvements in AI, there's no longer the need to manage complex rule sets. So look for opportunities to leverage AI and machine learning in your payment decisions. We have a few minutes left for questions. I think we had one more that came in, or two more that came into the chat. So Yossi, the first one is, just to clarify, isn't 3D Secure always applied when creating the first network token, not exclusively for Apple, Google Pay, but for typical online purchases that result in tokenization?
Well, it depends. If you use, let's call it regular standard network tokens, which are not device bounded, then no, there is no need to do 3DS or any other kind of two-factor authentication, for example, via the bank application, in order to authenticate the card holder and bind the token with the device. It is only required with device-bound network tokens. In my opinion, the vast majority of traffic of network tokens that comes directly from the merchant, not via Apple Pay or Google Pay wallet, is not a device-mount network token traffic. So, no.
Awesome. And I think we have time for this one final question, which is just how should I think about retry logic between network tokens and leveraging PANs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It means that you need to thoroughly interpret the decline reason of the first attempt. Because if, for example, you attempted to authorize with network token and got declined due to a neutral reason, let's call it that way, of insufficient fund, then there is no point to reattempt with PAN, assuming it's the same PAN that was used in order for provisioning the network token, because there are no funds. So but there are other options, for example, to apply a technique of identifying if there are other saved cards for the buyer, and then suggesting them to pick another card when reattempting. So it depends.
Awesome. Well, thank you. To wrap things up, we're just going to launch one more poll. If you're interested in discussing how to leverage AI machine learning in payments with Forwarder, and would like us to follow up with you after this webinar to learn more, you should see that pop up on your screen now. And while you guys respond to that, I just want to thank Yossi for coming and sharing all your great information that you have in terms of tokenization. As well as thank everyone for joining us today. If you have any additional questions following up to this, please don't hesitate to reach out to your CSM or account manager, and they'll pass you right along to Yossi and I, or you can reach out to us directly as well. All right, thank you everyone so much for joining, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.